She stood at the altar, abandoned and pregnant, when a stranger from the front row stood up, and with one sentence changed her life forever. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the chapel, casting soft patterns across rows of white chairs decorated with ribbons and fresh flowers. Everything had been arranged with precision, from the delicate music drifting through the air to the careful placement of candles along the aisle, and the atmosphere carried the quiet anticipation of a moment meant to mark a new beginning. Clara Mitchell stood at the altar, her hands clasped lightly in front of her, aware of the gentle weight of her wedding dress and the faint rustle it made when she shifted her posture. Her blonde hair had been styled with understated elegance, and her blue eyes remained fixed toward the entrance, searching for the familiar figure she had spent months imagining would appear beside her. The guests filled the space with murmured conversation, their voices softened by politeness and curiosity as time stretched beyond expectation. Clara maintained a composed expression, though beneath it uncertainty stirred with growing intensity, and she felt each passing minute settle heavily within her chest. She reminded herself to breathe steadily, to remain calm, yet an instinctive tension lingered that could not easily be dismissed. Hidden beneath the fabric of her dress was a secret she carried alone, one she had not yet revealed to anyone present, and the awareness of it deepened the significance of this day beyond ceremony. It was not merely a promise of partnership she awaited, but the hope of stability for the life already beginning within her. Music faltered and faded, and the quiet grew more noticeable as the expected moment failed to arrive. Clara's attention sharpened as she caught the glance of the coordinator moving toward her, the woman's expression marked by concern rather than reassurance. When she leaned close and spoke softly, her words carried finality that could not be softened by tone. The groom had left, she explained carefully, and would not return. Clara listened without immediate reaction, absorbing the meaning rather than the sound, and felt the surrounding room seem distant despite the closeness of those present. Her fingers instinctively tightened at her side, not from outward display but from the effort required to steady herself against the sudden absence of expectation. The guests began shifting in their seats, uncertainty transforming into subdued departure as they gathered belongings and avoided prolonged eye contact. Clara remained where she stood, maintaining dignity through stillness rather than retreat, her gaze lowered briefly before lifting again toward the empty doorway. Though disappointment pressed heavily upon her, she resisted allowing it to define her posture or presence. Instead, she acknowledged the reality before her with quiet resolve, understanding that humiliation, while painful, did not diminish her worth nor dictate her future. When at last she stepped away from the altar, her movements were measured and composed, reflecting strength cultivated through necessity rather than comfort. Outside, the air felt cooler, grounding her as she crossed into open space beyond the chapel walls. She paused briefly, drawing breath that carried both uncertainty and determination, and allowed herself to consider the path ahead. Within her remained not only the memory of abandonment, but the responsibility of care and protection for the child she carried, and that awareness shaped her resolve more powerfully than grief. Though the day had unfolded far differently from what she once envisioned, it did not conclude with defeat. Instead, it marked the beginning of a chapter defined by independence and courage, one in which her choices would guide outcomes rather than reliance upon promises withdrawn. Clara walked forward without haste, her steps guided by quiet strength, and within that movement lay the first sign that even in moments of loss, the capacity for resilience and renewal could quietly take root. The quiet that followed Clara's walk down the aisle did not last long, because the atmosphere inside the chapel shifted from stunned silence to restless movement. Guests began gathering their belongings with careful politeness, avoiding prolonged glances toward the altar, as though distance might soften the discomfort of what they had witnessed. Clara remained standing where she was for a few moments longer, composed not because she felt unshaken, but because she refused to let the humiliation dictate her behavior. Beneath the calm surface, however, uncertainty pressed heavily, and she fought to steady her breathing while considering what came next for both herself and the child she carried. It was during this uneasy transition that a subtle change occurred near the front rows. A man rose from his seat with measured confidence, neither hurried nor hesitant, drawing attention not through dramatic gesture but through quiet certainty. His presence carried composure shaped by experience, and his brown hair and steady blue eyes reflected calm thought rather than impulsive reaction. Those nearby recognized him, though whispers of recognition spread more through reputation than familiarity, because Adrian Collins was known beyond personal circles as a successful investor whose name appeared frequently in business headlines. Yet, in that moment, he seemed less defined by status and more by intention as he stepped forward. He approached the altar without spectacle, stopping at a respectful distance before addressing Clara with a voice low enough to preserve her dignity yet clear enough to convey sincerity. He acknowledged the difficulty of what had occurred and spoke not as someone seeking attention but as someone responding to injustice he had observed. His words were simple, offered without theatrics, expressing that no one deserved to endure such public abandonment, and that compassion sometimes demanded unexpected action. Then he proposed something that caused the remaining guests to pause once more, suggesting that if preserving the ceremony or offering her an alternative path would ease the moment, he was willing to stand beside her instead. Clara looked at him with astonishment, searching his expression for mockery or insincerity, yet finding neither. The proposal did not erase her pain nor resolve the uncertainty of her future, and she felt the weight of its implications immediately. Her response came carefully, guided by practicality rather than emotion, and she declined the notion of continuing the ceremony in haste. Despite the kindness within his offer, she understood that decisions shaping lives could not be made in reaction to humiliation alone. Adrian listened attentively, accepting her refusal without disappointment, and his respect for her choice reinforced the authenticity of his gesture. Their conversation continued briefly, shifting away from the spectacle surrounding them and toward acknowledgement of mutual understanding. Adrian expressed admiration for her composure, while Clara thanked him for stepping forward when few others had shown courage to intervene. The exchange carried no expectation beyond recognition, yet within it formed the beginnings of an unexpected connection shaped through empathy rather than circumstance. Guests gradually departed entirely, leaving the chapel quieter, and the significance of the moment settled into reflection rather than performance. When Clara finally left the building, she did so with a new awareness that compassion could appear in unfamiliar forms. Adrian did not attempt to follow or impose continued presence, allowing her space and dignity as she stepped into the uncertainty awaiting her. Yet his actions remained with her, not as resolution, but as reminder that even amid loss, gestures of humanity could restore balance. As she moved forward into the next chapter of her life, she carried both the weight of disappointment and the quiet reassurance that kindness, though unexpected, had not abandoned her entirely. The days that followed the interrupted ceremony unfolded with a strange mixture of quiet and adjustment, and Clara found herself navigating emotions she had little time to process fully. Practical matters demanded attention, from canceling arrangements to reorganizing plans she had once built around certainty, and she addressed each responsibility with deliberate calm. The reality of her pregnancy remained central in every decision, guiding her toward stability rather than reflection, yet the memory of that day lingered in subtle ways. Among those memories was the image of Adrian standing in the chapel, not as a spectacle of drama but as an unexpected presence of empathy, and she occasionally wondered about the sincerity that had prompted his gesture. A week later, she received a message from him, brief and respectful in tone, asking only whether she was managing well and offering assistance if she needed support. There was no pressure implied, no attempt to revisit the proposal he had once spoken aloud, and the restraint within his words encouraged her to respond without hesitation. Their correspondence began cautiously, rooted in simple conversation rather than obligation, and she discovered that speaking with him felt unexpectedly natural. Adrian did not dwell on what had happened nor attempt to define her experience through sympathy, instead engaging with genuine interest in her perspective and well-being. Their eventual meeting occurred in a quiet cafe, chosen for its neutrality and comfort rather than significance. Clara arrived with composed curiosity, aware of the unusual path that had brought them into conversation, and she observed Adrian with clearer understanding than circumstances had previously allowed. He carried himself with confidence, yet there was no arrogance in his demeanor, only attentiveness and respect. He listened carefully as she spoke, allowing her words to unfold without interruption, and when he shared details of his own life, she sensed authenticity beneath the accomplishments often associated with his name. He explained that his upbringing had been marked by instability, shaped by time spent in foster care and environments where belonging was never guaranteed. Success had come through persistence rather than privilege, and though he had achieved recognition and financial comfort, he admitted that the sense of family he valued most remained something he had yet to experience fully. Clara recognized in his honesty a vulnerability that contrasted with public perception, and it encouraged her to share her own concerns about motherhood and uncertainty with equal openness. Their conversation moved easily between reflection and humor, and by the time they parted, she felt not obligation but appreciation for the exchange. Weeks turned into continued interaction, and their meetings became opportunities for understanding rather than distraction. Adrian never attempted to assume responsibility that was not his, nor did he frame his presence as solution to her circumstances. Instead, he offered companionship grounded in respect, assisting when asked and encouraging independence when needed. Clara valued the consistency of his support, noting that it arrived without expectation of return, and she began to trust that his intentions were shaped by kindness rather than impulse. Through these interactions, Clara's perspective shifted gradually, allowing space for optimism that did not diminish her resilience. Adrian's presence did not erase the challenges ahead, yet it reminded her that connection could exist without complication, and that partnership, whether temporary or enduring, could arise through shared understanding. As she continued preparing for the arrival of her child, she did so with renewed confidence, aware that while her journey remained her own, she was no longer entirely alone in navigating its uncertainties. As Clara's pregnancy progressed, the rhythm of her days shifted toward preparation and anticipation, and the uncertainty that once overshadowed her thoughts gradually softened into practical focus. She reorganized her living space, attended medical appointments, and learned to balance moments of exhaustion with determination shaped by responsibility. Adrian remained present throughout this time, though never in a way that imposed or replaced her independence. His support expressed itself through consistency, accompanying her when she requested company or assisting quietly with arrangements that eased her workload. He treated each interaction with attentiveness, never overstepping boundaries, and his respect for her autonomy strengthened the trust growing between them. Their conversations deepened as months passed, moving beyond courtesy into genuine understanding of one another's perspectives. Clara spoke candidly about her hopes and anxieties regarding motherhood, and Adrian listened without offering unnecessary reassurance, responding instead with thoughtful reflection. He shared more of his own experiences as well, revealing how his childhood had shaped his views on belonging and connection, and she recognized in his openness a sincerity that encouraged her to reciprocate. Together they cultivated an environment where honesty replaced assumption, allowing their bond to develop without pressure or expectation. One evening, as they walked through a park illuminated by fading sunlight, their dialogue turned toward the future in ways neither had anticipated earlier in their acquaintance. Adrian spoke carefully, expressing admiration for her resilience and acknowledging the impact she had already had on his outlook. He clarified that his interest in her life extended beyond sympathy, yet he avoided framing his feelings as urgency or demand. Clara listened thoughtfully, considering the implications of his words, and she responded with equal honesty, explaining that trust had grown but that she wished to allow time to guide decisions rather than circumstance alone. Their exchange reflected mutual patience, reinforcing connection built through respect rather than impulse. When the day of the child's birth arrived, the atmosphere surrounding them carried intensity that transcended previous challenges. Clara faced the experience with courage, supported by medical staff and Adrian's steady presence beside her. He remained attentive throughout, offering encouragement and reassurance shaped by calm composure, and when the child entered the world, the moment carried profound emotional weight. The newborn boy, whom Clara named Noah, was placed gently into her arms, and the quiet realization of new responsibility settled between them. Adrian observed with visible reverence, aware that he had witnessed something deeply significant. Holding the infant for the first time at Clara's request, Adrian's expression softened in a way she had not seen before. His composure remained intact, yet warmth filled his gaze as he regarded the small life entrusted briefly into his care. The moment carried no declaration or expectation, only shared acknowledgement of the journey that had brought them together. In the days that followed, Adrian continued offering assistance, visiting respectfully and ensuring Clara's recovery remained supported without overwhelming her independence. Their relationship evolved naturally through shared experience rather than formal definition, and affection emerged through quiet gestures rather than dramatic acknowledgement. Through the weeks that followed, the presence of Noah reshaped both their perspectives, introducing joy and responsibility that strengthened their connection. Clara recognized that Adrian's involvement stemmed from genuine care rather than obligation, and she began to envision possibilities once dismissed as unlikely. Their companionship transitioned gradually toward partnership, culminating in a private decision made months later to formalize their bond through marriage, not as response to circumstance but as affirmation of trust cultivated through time. The ceremony they chose was intimate and sincere, reflecting their shared preference for authenticity over spectacle, and it marked the beginning of a chapter defined by mutual commitment and understanding. Life after their quiet wedding did not transform overnight into effortless harmony, yet it settled into a steady rhythm that reflected patience and shared responsibility. Clara adjusted to motherhood with growing confidence, learning to interpret Noah's needs through instinct and experience, while Adrian became a consistent presence within their household. He never claimed a role that was not his to claim, but he embraced participation with sincerity, assisting in routines and offering support that balanced attentiveness with respect for Clara's independence. Their home developed a sense of calm shaped by cooperation, and small moments of laughter and conversation gradually replaced the uncertainty that once defined their beginnings. Noah's presence brought a warmth that softened the edges of daily challenges, and Adrian found himself drawn into responsibilities he had never anticipated. Late nights spent soothing the child or mornings watching Clara's gentle attentiveness introduced him to a perspective of connection far removed from the structure of his professional life. Though unfamiliar at first, these experiences cultivated a quiet fulfillment, allowing him to engage with life in ways guided by empathy rather than strategy. Clara observed his involvement with appreciation, recognizing authenticity in his actions that required neither acknowledgement nor reward. Beyond the household, Adrian maintained his professional obligations, navigating commitments with discipline that had long defined his reputation. However, his priorities shifted subtly, and he structured his schedule to ensure presence within the family environment he now valued deeply. Colleagues noticed changes in his approach, perceiving greater reflection and balance within his decision-making, though few understood the personal growth underlying these adjustments. For Adrian, success no longer existed solely within measurable outcomes but extended into the continuity of relationships he nurtured at home. Clara, too, pursued growth beyond her responsibilities as a mother, re-engaging with aspirations that had once been postponed. Adrian encouraged her endeavors with thoughtful support, ensuring she maintained space for ambition alongside family life. Their partnership reflected mutual respect, each recognizing the importance of individual fulfillment within shared commitment. Conversations between them evolved into thoughtful exchanges about goals, fears, and expectations, strengthening a bond grounded in understanding rather than assumption. Yet amid stability, an undercurrent of vulnerability remained, shaped by awareness that the past had not fully disappeared. Clara occasionally sensed unease regarding unresolved connections to Noah's biological father, though she rarely voiced these thoughts openly. Adrian, perceptive yet patient, chose not to press her for explanation, trusting that openness would arise when necessary. Their trust allowed difficult topics to remain acknowledged without immediate resolution, preserving the balance they had built. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered softly into their living room, Clara watched Adrian play with Noah on the floor, the child's laughter echoing with carefree delight. The scene stirred both comfort and contemplation within her, reinforcing appreciation for the stability they had cultivated together. She understood that their path had been shaped by unpredictability, yet its outcome reflected resilience and choice rather than chance alone. In that moment, she recognized that love, though emerging gradually, had rooted itself firmly within their shared experience. Thus their lives continued forward, defined not by perfection but by authenticity, and each day contributed to strengthening connection through routine acts of care. Clara and Adrian navigated parenthood and partnership with patience and attentiveness, aware that growth remained ongoing rather than complete. Within the quiet continuity of their household existed the foundation of something enduring, and though uncertainty lingered beyond their immediate horizon, they faced the future with confidence shaped by trust, unity, and the shared understanding that belonging had been created through effort rather than circumstance alone. The sense of stability that Clara and Adrian had built did not fade suddenly, nor was it broken by a single dramatic moment. Instead, it was disturbed by something quieter yet far more unsettling, something that arrived without warning and carried the weight of unfinished history. It began on an otherwise ordinary afternoon when Clara received a message that unsettled her composure before she had even finished reading it. The sender was someone she had hoped never to hear from again, and the words carried both familiarity and threat, suggesting a desire to reappear in her life not with apology, but with claims she knew would affect far more than herself. She sat in silence for several minutes after reading it, absorbing its implications while Noah played nearby, unaware of the shift that had entered the room. The message came from the man who had once stood at the altar and then vanished, and now he insisted on recognition of his biological connection to the child. He spoke of rights, responsibility, and legal standing, framing his return not through remorse but through entitlement that unsettled Clara deeply. The past she had worked to place behind her resurfaced abruptly, forcing her to confront fears she believed had been resolved through distance and time. When Adrian returned home later that evening, he immediately noticed the tension she tried to conceal. Her composure rarely faltered, yet he understood her well enough to sense when something weighed heavily upon her. She shared the message without dramatics, presenting facts rather than emotion, and he listened with attentive calm that reflected both concern and restraint. His response avoided impulsive reassurance, focusing instead on clarity and practical consideration. He acknowledged the seriousness of the situation while affirming that she would not face it alone, and his measured confidence provided grounding she needed in that moment. The days that followed involved consultations with legal professionals, discussions shaped by evidence and careful strategy rather than confrontation. Clara participated actively in each decision, refusing to relinquish control over her circumstances, while Adrian offered support through resources and presence. They gathered documentation reflecting the absence that had defined the child's early life, and they prepared for proceedings with diligence shaped by understanding that resolution would require patience. Throughout this process, their communication remained open, reinforcing trust cultivated through shared experience. Emotionally, the situation challenged both of them in ways distinct yet connected. Clara wrestled with resurfacing memories and uncertainty about potential outcomes, and Adrian confronted the possibility that external forces might disrupt the family structure he had come to cherish. Yet, rather than allowing anxiety to fracture their unity, they addressed concerns through dialogue and reflection, strengthening connection through mutual reassurance. Noah remained sheltered from complexity, surrounded by care that ensured his world remained stable despite tensions beyond his awareness. As the legal confrontation approached, Clara found strength in recognizing how far she had progressed since the day she stood alone at the altar. She was no longer defined by abandonment but by resilience, supported by partnership grounded in respect and commitment. Adrian, in turn, recognized that defending their family extended beyond obligation into affirmation of belonging he had chosen and nurtured. Their preparations reflected determination shaped not by hostility but by protection of what they had built together. When the hearing finally began, the atmosphere carried solemn gravity, yet Clara entered with composure anchored in certainty of purpose. Adrian remained beside her, not overshadowing her voice but reinforcing her confidence through quiet solidarity. The confrontation marked a significant turning point, one in which past actions would be measured against present reality, and though its outcome remained beyond immediate reach, the process itself affirmed their shared resolve. As they left the courthouse that day, aware that proceedings would continue, They carried with them not only fatigue but strengthened conviction that whatever lay ahead would be faced together, guided by loyalty, patience, and the enduring belief that family is defined by care as much as by circumstance. The courtroom atmosphere carried a weight that pressed quietly upon everyone present, and Clara felt its intensity the moment she stepped inside. The setting was formal and restrained, yet beneath that order lay tension shaped by personal stakes rather than procedure alone. She moved forward with composed determination, aware that the outcome of the proceedings could influence the structure of her family in ways no preparation could fully anticipate. Adrian accompanied her, not intruding upon her role but standing beside her with steady presence that communicated support more clearly than words could express. His calm focus offered reassurance, and she drew strength from the knowledge that she did not face the confrontation alone. As testimony unfolded, the biological father presented his case with calculated confidence, emphasizing genetic connection and framing his absence as circumstantial rather than intentional. His words were measured and strategic, attempting to reshape perception of past choices into narratives of misunderstanding and delay. Clara listened without interruption, maintaining composure despite the emotional impact of hearing events reinterpreted before strangers. When her turn came to speak, she addressed the court with clarity and honesty, describing the realities she had navigated alone, the responsibilities she had carried, and the environment she had created for Noah. Her voice remained steady, not seeking sympathy but conveying truths shaped by experience. Adrian's involvement emerged through careful testimony that reflected his commitment to the child's well-being rather than personal interest. He spoke of consistency, of emotional support, and of the stability cultivated within their home, presenting observations grounded in everyday interactions rather than abstract claims. His manner remained respectful toward all parties, and this restraint reinforced credibility within the formal setting. Legal representatives supplemented their words with documentation and evidence illustrating absence, communication history, and the established care provided to Noah, constructing a narrative of responsibility sustained through action rather than assumption. Throughout the proceedings, Clara experienced moments of uncertainty, particularly when confronted with the undeniable reality of biological connection presented by the opposing side. Yet she balanced these emotions with awareness that parenthood extended beyond genetic association, encompassing devotion, protection, and presence demonstrated over time. Adrian's quiet encouragement during brief pauses reminded her of this broader perspective, allowing her to remain centered despite pressure. The judge observed attentively, weighing arguments with measured neutrality that underscored the seriousness of the decision ahead. When deliberations concluded, the ruling reflected careful consideration of all factors presented. Custody was affirmed to remain with Clara, acknowledging the continuity of care she had provided and the environment she had established. The biological father was granted limited, supervised visitation rather than authority to remove the child from his current life, and the outcome balanced recognition of genetic ties with prioritization of emotional and developmental stability. Clara absorbed the decision with visible relief, understanding that while the process had not erased complexity, it safeguarded the family foundation she had built. Outside the courtroom, the air felt lighter despite lingering exhaustion, and Adrian remained beside her as they reflected quietly on what had transpired. Their exchange required few words, as shared experience conveyed understanding more effectively than elaboration. Clara recognized that resilience and support had guided them through confrontation, and Adrian acknowledged admiration for her composure and strength throughout the ordeal. Together they returned home with renewed appreciation for unity forged through challenge, aware that while future adjustments might arise, they had faced adversity with integrity and cooperation. That evening, as Noah played peacefully in familiar surroundings, Clara observed him with gratitude shaped by both relief and perspective. She understood that the day had marked not merely resolution of conflict but affirmation of values defining their household. Adrian joined her, sharing quiet reflection on how circumstance had tested and strengthened their bond, and within that calm recognition lay reassurance that their journey forward would continue shaped by empathy, patience, and commitment grounded in shared purpose rather than external uncertainty. In the weeks after the court proceedings concluded, life did not return instantly to normal, yet it settled into a steadier rhythm shaped by relief and renewed perspective. Clara found herself moving through daily routines with a lighter sense of certainty, aware that the outcome had protected the stability she had worked so hard to build. While adjustments were still necessary and occasional communication regarding supervised visits continued, the atmosphere within their home regained its warmth. Noah remained blissfully absorbed in childhood, his laughter filling the rooms, and Clara took comfort in knowing that his world remained grounded in familiarity and care. Adrian's presence during this period became even more meaningful, not because he sought recognition, but because his involvement reflected enduring commitment rather than situational reaction. He continued to share responsibilities, helping maintain the balance they had created, and his attentiveness demonstrated that his role extended beyond legal circumstances. Conversations between him and Clara deepened with reflection upon what they had endured, and they spoke openly about the lessons drawn from the experience. Through these exchanges, they recognized how adversity had strengthened trust, reinforcing appreciation for partnership defined by mutual support rather than convenience. One evening, after Noah had fallen asleep, Adrian raised a subject he had considered carefully. He spoke with gentle seriousness, expressing his desire to formalize the bond he felt toward the child through legal adoption. His reasoning was thoughtful and unpressured, grounded in emotional connection rather than assertion, and he emphasized that the decision must reflect Clara's comfort and Noah's well-being above all else. Clara listened in silence, moved by the sincerity behind his words, and she took time to reflect before responding. The proposal represented more than legal documentation. It symbolized affirmation of belonging and identity within the family they had cultivated together. After discussion and consideration, Clara agreed, recognizing that Adrian's role in Noah's life had long transcended definition through circumstance alone. The process required patience, paperwork, and evaluation, yet each step felt meaningful rather than burdensome. Adrian approached every requirement with diligence, demonstrating commitment through action, and Clara observed with quiet pride as he embraced responsibilities that reflected both affection and responsibility. When the adoption was finalized, the moment carried emotional significance beyond ceremony, marking recognition of a bond already present within daily life. Celebration of the occasion remained intimate and sincere, shared privately rather than publicly, and the warmth of the evening reflected unity built through shared experience. Noah, still young enough to perceive joy without comprehending legal intricacies, responded with happiness that needed no explanation, and Adrian felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude as he regarded the family around him. Clara watched the interaction with appreciation, understanding that what they had achieved together represented resilience shaped through choice and trust. Their future continued unfolding through ordinary moments enriched by awareness of how fragile beginnings had been. Plans extended beyond immediate concerns toward aspirations involving education, travel, and personal growth, each discussed collaboratively rather than individually. Adrian balanced his professional commitments with dedication to family, ensuring presence remained priority, and Clara pursued ambitions encouraged by newfound stability. Together they cultivated an environment where love and respect guided decisions, reinforcing connection that had matured through challenge. As seasons shifted and time advanced, Clara occasionally reflected upon the path that had led them to this chapter, recognizing how unpredictability had ultimately revealed opportunity. Adrian shared these reflections, acknowledging that the courage required to confront adversity had deepened his understanding of belonging and responsibility. Within their home existed not perfection but authenticity, shaped by effort and acceptance, and the bond they shared stood as testament to transformation achieved through compassion and perseverance. Years passed with a quiet sense of continuity, and the life Clara and Adrian had built together settled into something steady and deeply rooted rather than fragile or uncertain. The early turbulence that once defined their beginning gradually transformed into shared memories that no longer carried pain but perspective. Their home became filled with the rhythms of growth and change, with Noah's curiosity expanding as he matured, and with laughter that reflected belonging rather than recovery. Clara often observed these moments with gratitude, aware that what once seemed impossible had evolved into everyday reality shaped by resilience and patience. Adrian remained fully engaged in both his professional world and his role within the family, yet he approached success differently than he once had. Ambition no longer existed as isolated pursuit. It became intertwined with responsibility toward those whose lives were connected to his own. He attended school events, participated in conversations about ambitions and fears, and provided guidance grounded in attentiveness rather than authority. Clara, meanwhile, continued pursuing her own aspirations, balancing independence with partnership, and together they maintained an environment in which mutual respect defined their decisions. Their relationship matured through time into something natural and unforced, strengthened not through dramatic declarations but through daily cooperation and shared understanding. Noah grew into a thoughtful and lively presence, carrying within him the influences of both stability and encouragement. His bond with Adrian developed organically, defined by trust and affection that required no explanation, and Clara found reassurance in watching their interactions unfold with sincerity. Family gatherings, travels, and ordinary evenings created a collection of experiences that reinforced unity, and each milestone served as a reminder that belonging had been shaped through commitment rather than coincidence. Even moments of disagreement or challenge were approached constructively, reflecting communication skills refined through years of shared experience. Occasionally, Clara revisited memories of the day her life diverged from expectation, recognizing how profoundly that moment had altered her trajectory. What had once seemed devastating now appeared as a turning point, guiding her toward relationships and opportunities she might never have encountered otherwise. Adrian shared this perspective, acknowledging that compassion extended unexpectedly on that day had ultimately reshaped his understanding of connection and purpose. Their reflections remained private and thoughtful, grounded in appreciation rather than nostalgia, and they carried forward with awareness of how unpredictability had influenced growth. One evening, as they gathered together after a long day, the calm atmosphere of their home reflected the culmination of choices made with care and courage. Conversation flowed easily, and Clara realized that fulfillment did not emerge from flawless beginnings but from dedication sustained over time. Adrian felt similar recognition, understanding that the role he embraced within their family represented one of the most meaningful achievements of his life. The future remained unwritten, yet they faced it with confidence rooted in unity and trust, prepared to meet whatever developments lay ahead. This story is entirely fictional and created by the channel's author, and any resemblance to real people is purely coincidental. If you found yourself faced with an unexpected chance to reshape your life through compassion rather than certainty, would you have the courage to embrace it, or would hesitation hold you back? This story is not only about a romantic gesture, but about human choice in a moment of someone else's pain. The author intended to show that life rarely unfolds according to plan, and the most powerful turning points occur when a person chooses compassion over calculation. Clara represents resilience and dignity, while Adrian reminds us that kindness and responsibility can transform not only another person's life but one's own. The narrative emphasizes that family is formed not only through blood ties, but through the daily choice to remain present, protect, and support one another.